PWAs, which is somewhat ironically going to involve me talking about things in addition to desktop PWAs and trying to give you a little bit of a sense of how at least I see all of these different components fitting together. Enter presenter mode. Okay, so what is kind of the end goal, right, is to enable the web to support all the content traditionally reserved for the native desktop operating system. The motivations for why we're doing this is that we want to empower Windows and Mac OS level of content to the web, the idea of being able to do absolutely everything on the web. We want to solve for cases like Electron, NWJS, CEF, cases where developers who want to be developing with web-based technologies feel the need to break out of the browser to get this additional deeper access. We want to enable offline use cases on the web by providing the appropriate affordances. We want to decrease the on-ramp cost to increase the conversion for kind of the long tail set of content. So when you think about the web today, it's primarily consumable content. It's used for reading and watching and kind of e-commerce and a few applications here and there. And this is content that works really well on a tab. You're kind of comfortable jumping between different parts of the experience quickly. And then when you think about desktop applications, it's primarily interactive content. And it's used for a lot of creativity tools and getting things done. And this has traditionally always been in a standalone window. And this also just so happens to be the largest missing category from Chrome OS. Oh, gee. So when you think about the web as a set of properties and desktop applications as a set of property, the web has things like linkability, universality, the low friction, the safe by default origin model, syncing across devices, things like that, an incremental loading and streaming based model. Whereas desktop applications, have their own windowing, they have really maximized peak performance, they have really powerful capabilities or sometimes just raw system access. They're generally persistent and work offline. And they tend to be fairly monolithic or packaged in how you acquire them. So our kind of main theory is that the web is actually great for applications, and that because of certain specific properties, like the no install required and the very wide reach, and a bunch of the other ones that we listed, applications can actually work really well within this paradigm and take advantage of these different superpowers to offer a superior experience to what you could actually create on a native-based platform. Our hypothesis, or rather hope, is that it's really just the lack of systems integration and capabilities that have been keeping applications from actually coming to the web. It's also really great for developers. You have a very large developer-educated user base. A lot of people that we talked to who use Electron wanted to build a native application, never wanted to be on the web, but literally couldn't find native application developers. They could only find web developers. And so like the web as a desktop platform really has kind of become the de facto standard from a developer perspective. And then of course the promise, write once, run everywhere, I think is well achieved through the web. So we want to enable this kind of like workflow. And this is just one example of how web apps can take advantage of these different web superpowers. If you can imagine someone working in Figma, they want to get some feedback from one of their peers. And so they just like grab the link from the URL bar, ping it over Slack or any other medium. And the person receiving that link, regardless of what operating system on, regardless of what application they have installed or don't have installed or whatnot, they can click on that link with 100% confidence that they'll be able to open it, access it, maybe leave some comments. Maybe if they have a license, they can do deeper editing and whatnot. And of course, the application developer can take this moment as an upsell to expand their reach. So I really like this formulation. I didn't draw this picture. I wish I did because it's great. But we kind of have this visualization of the developer who is in native land. They have, any language choice that they want. They have full system access most of the time. They can be loaded into every application store, and they have that sense of control over their own destiny. We want the developer to make the leap to the Emerald City of the web-based application platform. But in between that is the pit of uncertainty, bad decisions, and shame that we don't want the developer falling into. And so we think about 3 ways to incentivize the jump: reducing the gap, increasing the appeal of the other side, and reducing the fear that something will go wrong if you do misstep on your way there. So our mission, which you all know, fulfill the promise, blah, blah, blah. Our approach, these are very wordy slides. I grabbed these from like old decks that were not meant to be consumed in this fashion, so I'm just going to go by. But yeah, we're going to fill the technology gap. We're going to make it easier with WebAssembly porting. We're going to increase the desirability through discoverability and monetization, and leverage the web superpowers. Some assumptions and risks, things like the fact that the web benefits can outweigh the drawbacks, such as lack of device access or guarantee of new feature compatibility and support. Cross-browser adoption is a goal. If we can't achieve it, we need large enough market share that it effectively doesn't matter. Another assumption is that we can actually make powerful enough versions of these capabilities and actually, remove the fear of missing out in developers' heads. And that this is all going to happen within a timescale that is actually feasible, and that this isn't going to be a 10 or 20-year long journey. This is, again, a very wordy slide, but the TLDR of it is that desktop is just a lot easier than mobile. One example of where this comes out is that when I, as a mobile user, want to go and acquire an application, my immediate instinct is to go to the Play Store or iOS App Store. That's where I find everything. That's how I get access to content. Whereas on desktop, it happens primarily through Google search, but also through things like the Microsoft Store, which now lists PWAs. And this is all to say that we have much more of an opportunity to kind of intercept the user at the right point in their journey and say, hey, instead of downloading this 10 gigabyte file, just click this button and start using it. And that's a real opportunity that we can leverage. So when we talk about reducing the technology gap, this is the part where I talk about things that aren't actually desktop PWAs. But I kind of have this three-part framing of how we reduce the technology gap. First piece of that is WebAssembly, which has two very distinct and very important functions. One is definitely the performance. You get much more reliable performance. JavaScript is extremely fast. It's the PM for the V8 team. I love JavaScript. I'm not going to say anything bad about it, but you can get much higher performance with WASM when you include things like threads and SIMD support. And the other component of WebAssembly that is extremely important is the portability aspect. The fact that I can now take a code base and bring it to the web without actually having to rewrite it. The example that I like the most of this was AutoCAD, which took their 35-year-old code base, a code base that literally predates the creation of the web itself. And now that's just running in a tab. And they took like 2 to 3 engineers for like half a year to do it. And that's pretty incredible. So Fugu, this is the part that you hopefully all know a little bit about. But this is basically the capabilities piece of that. And so, of course, we're doing a lot of prioritization and operationalizing of all this. This is a slide I made like over half a year ago now. So I guess you'll be the person to decide whether or not we actually did it. But I like to think we've been doing a pretty good job of prioritizing these things against partner requests. And then, of course, there's the part about destroying FOMO. And I kind of have this 3-step formulation. The first thing that we need to do to remove fear of missing out for developers is to just catch up on capabilities. These are the table stakes. These are the things that native applications have always had, file system access, many others, that we just need to catch up on. Then our plan is to set a certain turnaround time and say that once a capability or feature reaches a certain amount of device or user penetration, that we commit to adding support to it on the web within a certain time frame. And the last part is, of course, just being extremely vocal, going to events, conferences, talking to developers to really change their mind share and instill in them the idea that the web is here to support you. It is going to be continually updated. It's going to be something that you can rely on. PWA, this is the part that you actually know about and I should be talking about, but it's pretty simple. You have the installable experience where you get your own window treatment. You can do this either through the 3-dot menu or Omnibox icon. I should remove the soon there because we actually just shipped Omnibox icon badging. And I think beyond just the windowing, it's also about being well integrated into the system. I think our lovely folks from Microsoft will follow me by talking a little bit more about this. But basically making sure that your PWA shows up in all of the places where you would expect other applications to show up and that it feels like it belongs in the operating system. So now if we come back to this kind of like list that I showed you earlier of some of the properties of the web versus some of the properties of traditional desktop applications, we want to keep everything that's great about the web, the linkability, the universality, all of that. But we also really want to bring windowing through the desktop PWA installability. We want to bring the maximized and reliable performance through WebAssembly, powerful capabilities through Fugu, and then the persistence and offline support through Service Worker. We're going to leave out the no permission model thing. We kind of like permission models, so we're going to have that. We don't want these applications to be entirely monolithic, but there are some interesting opportunities around web packaging and how we can potentially pursue different distribution models for this content. And so kind of last slide, I think on my part is just some of what we've heard about what holds back adoption. Lack of Mac support. We now have great engagement from Windows to make desktop PWAs feel well integrated, but Mac is going to be probably a much longer journey. Lack of capabilities that developers are currently getting through Electron. This is obviously what we're trying to burn down. And then there's the fear of missing out aspect, which is still definitely a reality. I think Electron is a really interesting case point in this. Because it does kind of let us tell developers that they can go and invest in primarily a web stack. And if somehow Chrome implodes in the next few years, hopefully not, then they can still turn to Electron and actually have that as like their backup plan. And then we still really need to improve discoverability. This has been a long-standing item on the Chrome side. Microsoft is doing much better with their store in that front than we are. And then there's uncertainty in some developers' mind about how do I position my desktop PWA along my native app, whether that's an existing native app that they've had for years or their Electron app. Like Figma had this problem where they're building out a PWA for Chrome OS, but they want to kind of wait and see and have some of these capabilities land before they're willing to like confuse their users about potentially asking them to install something else. Any questions on all of that? That was a lot. Come on, one question. No? Okay. Yes.
What are the key gaps to Electron that devs are, concerned about? Yeah, Mike.
Yes. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So can you talk?
Yes, I can.
Does this work? The other one. No, doesn't work either.
Turn it on.
So can you talk a bit about the key gaps to Electron that the developers are concerned about and how you are planning to address those?
Yeah. So I have this little deck that I can flip through a little bit more of, but this is basically an overview of what some of the specific APIs that you get access to through Electron. Electron lets developers use Node native modules to basically build out their own content and then share that, but there is also like a core of Electron. In investigating most of the actual packages that people use, they aren't super popular. There aren't a ton that really rise above and beyond what you could do on the web today. But it's a lot of, in the base Electron, the windowing is very important, kind of being able to create your own window and also control the top bar, like entirely control the UI. Having proper integration into menus, things like the top menu bar along here. And then communications, sockets is a big one for a lot of Electron users that we have to tackle. And let's see, anything else that I forgot? That's about it. Yeah.
All right, Thomas, I got a question.
Yeah.
So that's great information. How, is this information easily discoverable in the public forum from the research that we've done? Are these slides linked from somewhere that people can get to?
Not in the public forum, no. I could probably make this deck public by copying it over to Chromium. And if anybody wants these slides, you're more than welcome to see them. All right. Yeah.
Yeah, so no questions, but just a comment about with Fugu, we are bridging the gap, that's fine. But for performance, definitely. I showed you the image processing things yesterday. When I had used simple WASM, it was still not great. But then with SIMD and thread support, let's say the FPS count went 5x, which is almost native. We used native things also to test benchmark, and it was similar. So just in case somebody tells you web is not fast, just enable some flags and try out. It is good enough.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. JavaScript over the years has gotten to the point where if you're writing reasonably good JavaScript, that it's going to be extremely fast. And WebAssembly at the base layer isn't going to give you a like 2 or 3x speed up on top of that. Threads and SIMD will give you that. Okay, I think that was relatively well timed. Riley, one more question?
I think also, like, along with the question of like whether or not these slides can be public, I think that there's definitely an argument being had within the web platform community about whether or not the web is a place for apps or a place for documents, whether or not this goal makes sense at all. And so I guess like the question is, do you think you see? I think you think that this argument is compelling, but like, do you think we could communicate that in a way that would be compelling to other vendors? There's going to be hopefully a session at TPAC discussing this exact question. So maybe that's an opportunity to clean up these slides and present them in a more.
Yeah. I have a AI to go and talk to Tom to figure out what we want to do for that session, but I could definitely see including some of these slides. These slides are a little bit about kind of why Google, I think, wants to do some of this stuff and kind of how we conceptualize of it. I think I could add a lot more details about kind of the value that the web brings to actual end users. I think one of the key points there is that we acknowledge that by making the web more capable and more like native platforms, that it does increase the potential attack surface for malicious actors. But our kind of hope or stipulation, hypothesis, whatever you want to call it, is that by building these things on the web, you end up with users having to download less native software. And that ultimately that gives them more security in the end. And I think we can make some of those kinds of arguments at TPAC. And I'm very, very excited to hear how the other browsers respond.
Yeah, I think framing this in a way that makes it clear that it really does help users, and that, like, because nobody other than Google cares whether it helps Google.
Exactly. So yeah, we'll definitely have lots of discussions about that at TPAC. But with that, I want to hand us off to the esteemed colleagues at Microsoft.
All right. Should be exciting. Okay, so this is the starting point. So we need one of this. No, not that. This one. Okay. Oh, no, there's like 5 of these. Okay. Too many choices. What's gonna happen? All right. Maybe. No.
Just show as a monitor. Hey.
Oh, hey. All right. Cool. Probably not stand behind this. I'm too short.
You need a mic though.
Yeah. All right. You can stand up there. Cool. So yeah, we kind of threw together some stuff, not super formal. So if there's thoughts on any of this, feel free to chime in.
Should I hit record?
Oh, do we need to hit record
Push
again?
the record button.
It's already recording.
Oh,
Okay, cool.
great.
So yeah, we just wanted to share from our point of view kind of what we're thinking in terms of desktop PWA, what we've started doing, and kind of why we care. So for starters, what are our goals? We started this with figuring out how we can bring native feeling PWA experience to people on Windows. So today we'll show you in a few minutes some of the places where if you're a Windows user and you're used to managing apps through your OS, there's a lot of rough edges today where PWAs just don't feel native to the OS. In addition, we want to expand the platform so that people writing a desktop app from scratch would consider PWA as a good candidate and think of it as kind of a premium experience, not a second class, oh, I may as well just like tick this box and get desktop too. As part of that, we're hoping we can work with all of you to evolve desktop PWA as an actual platform, not just for us, but for everyone. And lastly, at Microsoft, we don't just have desktop windows. We have things like Xbox and Holo and things like that. So as we evolve PWAs for Edge, we want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that we can take advantage of that on our other devices. So not specifically desktop, but related. So why do we care about desktop? Yesterday, we talked a lot about, or there were a lot of conversations about why mobile is sort of the future and where a lot of computing is moving. But today, we still have over 1 billion engaged Windows users. That's a lot of people. And these are people using Windows on a daily basis, not like once a month. So there's a ton of usage minutes happening in the browser. A lot of them are already happening in the browser, which is something we talked about, but we still see in the ballpark of like 30% of usage being other apps. So there's still a lot of desktop app engagement on these devices, and they're apps that are often not well maintained, haven't been touched in a lot of years. The platform itself hasn't been evolving. So there's a lot of underserved developer market that we can take advantage of. There's also a lot of enterprise scenarios that are still really tied to desktop and aren't going anywhere anytime soon. But the cool thing about PWA is even if developers are web or mobile first, we can really easily transition them into getting great desktop experiences. So we took a stab at filling out just ways that we think desktop and mobile differ in terms of as we're building out PWA as a desktop platform, some things that we maybe need to think about a little bit differently than how we have with mobile. So we kind of wanted to open this up if other people had thoughts, but some of the ones we had, one of them is just how users think about apps. Like if I'm deciding to download an app on a mobile device versus my desktop, my decision matrix is different. There's a lot of things on web that or on desktop that I'll just use through the web because I don't need like a quick access button. Similarly, app acquisition, Thomas touched on this a little bit a second ago, but like on a mobile device, I just go right to the store and there's no question of looking really elsewhere. On desktop, there's already a bunch of different ways you can download apps. Windowing and displays is a big one. The windowing model for desktop systems is completely different. You have like banking traders and stuff like that that'll put 15 different windows in really precise positions across 8 different monitors. And when they reboot the machine, all the windows have to go back to the exact same spot or their traders get really upset. And so things like that just don't exist on mobile. And so this is a problem space that I think is a lot harder and is one of the things that a lot of people are moving to Electron because of. Input modalities is another interesting one. On desktop devices, you can have, like on desktop Windows, a mouse actually has like 8 buttons that you can access as a native app. That's not a thing that a mobile device necessarily would even think about, but that's the type of thing that like game developers use all the time or things like that. And then, yeah, just pure device capabilities. I picked a floppy disk because I thought it was kind of funny, but in general, just like the desktop machines and mobile machines have just completely different things that the hardware is even capable of. So I don't know. Those are thoughts we had, but if anyone else has thoughts, yeah. Cool. So some of the gaps that we see. Number one is what all of us here kind of talk about all the time, evolving capabilities to match the native platform. But what we're going to talk about today and kind of show a little bit more of is number 2, which is making the apps feel more native to the OS. So the things that, unless you're a native user of that operating system, you may not know are the things that are the gaps. And then lastly, figuring out how we get people to actually download those apps. But like I said, today we're going to talk about number 2. So do you want to talk about this one?
So do you want to show the experience? This is well rehearsed.
Yeah, super formal. Yeah, so should I show some of these things?
Yeah, sure. Let's talk about this slide.
Cool.
So, so one of the things that we feel from a Windows perspective that app developers really expect, or that end users expect from an app, is integration with the operating system in a way that feels like if you can't tell the difference between a Win32 app and a PWA. So that would include things like the task manager. You just took away my list.
It's right there.
Being able to uninstall with just one click, like right click from the start menu. You want to be able to share content, and you want to be able to integrate with other surfaces like the settings menu, or if you enable notifications, we can't have those notifications mapped to the browser. We have to have those notifications mapped to PWA. Jump list, which is the actual name of the API for when you right click something in your in the taskbar, and there's a list of things that come up. Like if you're on Pinterest, it might have a play and a view pins. If you're on Spotify, it might have a play and a pause button. Customizing that with a most recently used list or something along those lines requires a specific identity, and then other prerequisites for like other devices that are going to come along the line. So we had to think of a way to make PWAs on Windows look like all those apps while still being installable from the browser. When we tried this with PWAs in the past, many of you may know or not know, Windows has a PWA story right now. It's through the store, and all those PWAs have to be signed, store signed, which requires a lot of hoops that a developer has to go through. It's not like it's not like a web experience. They have to go through hoops to get it signed by the store. And so we also wanted to figure out a way to avoid having to sign things. So she's going to show you sort of what it looks like today before identity and how painful it is for PWA.
And then we have videos showing some of these
Just a
things
video.
fixed, but not all.
It's like to build this video that you're going to see, we had to use a private branch with private bits and merged. And we're in a state right now where we're working on this, actively working on this.
Yeah, so one of the things, the first thing we called out is Task Manager. So here I have the Starbucks PWA, and when I launch it, you can see my Microsoft Edge process count went up. And when I expand it, there's this one rogue Edge process called Starbucks. This is an example of where if you were actually, like if the app was hung or something and you wanted to kill the app, it's pretty standard that someone Control-Alt-Delete and looks for Starbucks. You would never, as a user of Windows, think to like expand the Edge bucket and look for Starbucks and kill it from there. Right. And so being able to actually have a unique entry in Task Manager that has the Starbucks logo and the Starbucks name and things like that is one of the things that we're working on. The next one's one-click uninstall. So today, if I similarly go to Starbucks and right-click to uninstall it, it'll pop me to this random other thing that also is, the item isn't even like highlighted. It's just not a good experience. If you do this with most Windows apps, it just uninstalls in place and you don't go to this other thing. Another one is presence as a share target. So like if I'm in my file explorer and I go to share something, there's a list of apps that'll crop up of places where I can send content to. And right now PWAs don't have a way to register to be one of these. So as we look at different app partners, this is something that matters to apps that are, share locations. Integration Windows surfaces, I picked like Notification Manager to show up, but basically we have a bunch of surfaces where there's a list of apps, and right now PWAs don't have a way to show up here. They're just Edge or Chrome as it may be. Jump list customization, John talked about this briefly, but so like on Teams, when I right click, you can see I have like new chat and settings and things like that for the app. These aren't things that a PWA can do today. So I can pull up the video of stuff working better.
Okay, so I'm going to assume for a second that most people in here don't use Windows, and so this is it's weird. This is such a new world for me. Taking on the. I've said I've been at Microsoft for 20 years, and I've never had to worry about how things behave on a Mac. So this is a PowerShell window here. In Power, the demo here is showing how far we've gotten so far with this identity model using Windows. And so what we're going to see here is a PowerShell window where the developer creates an app, and then he's going to install a PWA, and he's going to show in PowerShell how Windows recognizes it as a totally separate process, a totally separate app, and it has unique identity. And then from there, you'll be able to see that it appears as a shared target and as something that can be uninstalled with one click. Yeah. No.
It's a video, so.
So I'm sorry, I was joking, but actually it's not. It's a video. Can we? I don't know. Let me see if I can zoom in. Can I zoom in?
Try.
You can move to the front of the room.
Yeah, I can try.
Go for it. Cheers. It might.
I'm happy to try. Yeah.
I don't think it will.
There are
Forget it.
Yeah, come up. I can't see.
Yeah, we can.
You can also pause it. Like,
Yeah.
I'll hit play and I'll sort of read what it says, but let me hit play and see how it looks. I'll let you come up
Sorry.
first. Sorry, this was something I was really hoping to be able to bring in and show you.
Yeah.
But everything broke with a merge 2 days ago.
Got an email from John
so
at
we
5
went
a.m.
back.
this morning of, hey, we got a video, and that was exciting.
Yeah, we had to go back like 3 builds to get a working build. Okay, so I'm gonna hit play. So we have, I'll hit pause as I'm talking about this. So what he showed here right at the beginning is, this says Microsoft.microsoftedge.stable. So for each of our different releases, beta, dev, canary, stable, you can create PWAs from each of those separately, and they will exist separately with separate identity. So stable edge has a separate identity from canary edge, and the PWAs created from each of those will also have separate identity so that you can have Starbucks canary and Starbucks stable. So this is a test PWA that we created. He's installing it.
I like the logo.
You like the logo? And so now it's a PWA installed, and it shows up in apps, of course. And it also shows up in Start.
Sorry.
Let me hit pause.
Oh. I don't know what happens if you run as administrator.
Not recommended. The question was, what happens when you run as administrator? I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Should that be blocked?
Yeah, so we have had conversations about it. We actually have. I'm trying to think of where we stand with it. I'm actually not sure. It's a great question. It won't allow you to get system level access of the registry or anything like that when you run as administrator. But
I guess it might give you access to certain files that aren't available to that user itself, especially through like the native files.
yeah, exactly. So the reason that I'm hesitant is because just the security holes. I'm not sure how we're patching them exactly. But yeah, it's something that we have to absolutely consider. It's top of mind. We have security reviews on this going constantly because there's a great deal of concern around how the permissions model works.
You could also start Edge as administrator, and that would probably be the same. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So for example, right. So the statement. Yeah, you're on the mic. Okay. So we block right now, for example, installing a PWA when you're in private or incognito. We're going to look at different ways of blocking it from different access levels. Then he shows in PowerShell, he's getting the first one was getting Apex package for Edge stable. Now it's getting Apex package for this test app. You can see that it's got a separate name, completely separate from Edge. It's just his GitHub IO package name that he wrote. And then from here, the share target is available. Right there, he's got his PWA app showing up as a share target. And I believe the next thing is the one-click uninstall.
Got to do that one last.
Yeah. And it uninstalls with one click. Yeah, it was 2 clicks. That was 2 clicks. And then you can see, just to prove that it's gone, he tries to get the Apex package name again, and it fails.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
So then you want to go back to your slides?
Yeah, sure. I think there's only like one slide left, maybe. Magnifier attempt. Oh, magnifier, that would have been good.
Oh, well.
Yeah. Yeah. So, oh yeah, you wanted to.
Oh yeah. So I put a deck. I put a slide on here just to show how Chrome can participate in this. So we've been doing work we've been landing patches in Chromium, and we've been working with Shell and other internal teams at Microsoft in Windows in order to enable the scenarios you just saw. What we're going to do is publish a documentation, a set of documentation about how any app can take advantage of this. In a nutshell, what happens is Edge becomes what's going to be known as a host app. And so that host can spawn children. Those children can have their own unique identity. So in order for Chrome to participate in that model, they're going to have to do a little bit of work in order to tell Windows that we are a host. The first thing is to get permission from Microsoft to do that. I've already made sure that Chrome is going to be granted permission. That would suck to come here and say, oh, too bad. But what it means is that you basically create a side-by-side exe. So in addition to chrome.exe, there's what we called PWA helper.exe, but whatever the name is for Chrome. So it's pretty complex, but it sits alongside Chrome. And when we launch the PWA helper, it actually launches PWA helper.exe, which launches with parameters and gives it its unique identity. So this means that to the end user, there is no additional work. They just double click the PWA and work happens in the background. But that means from Chrome developers' perspective, they have to include a PWA helper.exe and manifest and basically treat it like a packaged app. MSIX is the way that we install. And instead of having to be store signed, like I mentioned before, which was a severe blocker for developers, or even signed through some other certificate agency, like I think happens on Android, these are going to be signed because of the Chrome certificate. So Chrome gets the certificate. Chrome is signed based on the PWA helper. This is why Windows needs to give permission, because we can't have just any old app coming along and saying all my children should be effectively treated as signed apps. That's a very dangerous thing to do. And so we say, yes, Chrome has the permission to create children that are effectively signed. And then so when a user comes by and clicks the install button or installs the PWA via whatever means they use, that is treated as a signed app because it's got the Chrome certificate, which is what you'd put on the machine. And you only do one certificate per machine, so they're all shared. It's a really interesting solution to this problem that we've had people who are way smarter than me working on for several months. It's been quite an amazing effort. And when you see the documentation and figure out how Chrome's going to participate in this, the work that Chrome has to do is pretty minimal, considering how much work has gone into Windows to enable this. It's really cool. And then let's see if there's missing. Yeah, so to the web devs who are creating PWAs, nothing additional. To the end user who's launching PWAs, nothing additional. The only additional work is on the actual browser vendors themselves. And you do that once and then it's done.
And from this, you get like automatic.
Thanks. And of course,
then from this, you automatically get all the stuff we were showing, like the really
just
easy
shows up.
uninstall. It shows in Task Manager. You have the ability to do other OS integration and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's most of our content, but just kind of what's next. We still have to finish this up. As you can see, our demo video is in our like low level branches, code still getting finished, etc. The other thing is, like John said throughout this, is that we had Windows side changes to enable all of this. So we still have to figure out our down level story. And there are a lot of places where we're working with the Sydney team on figuring out what we can and should do on different down level versions of Windows. Then yeah, just continuing to prioritize key partner asks. And then this whole kind of method of packaging up applications as trusted host and whatnot is the prerequisite work we need to run apps on any of the other Microsoft devices. So yeah,
that's it.
That's it. That's all we have.
All right. Cool. So any questions about that? Yeah. You stay up here.
Yeah, I'll say.
I'm not sure if you can or want to share anything of this, but I'm curious, didn't you have to fight fights internally to make this happen? Or was there at one point someone at Microsoft who said, this is like our good old UWP system model or whatnot? Like, if anything you want to share. If not, no problem at all.
Let me try and restate. So you're asking if there was a lot of internal arguing and fighting about doing this instead of sticking with UWP or something along those lines. Yeah. I have always been a strong proponent of web first and web tech first, and my history is not really all that important. But I worked on SharePoint when it was initially invented, and then worked on SharePoint to build it out as a single page application. And I wrote a book about how to build single page applications on SharePoint. And so I've been a strong proponent of just doing web tech and not worrying about UWP and signing and all this other stuff. So I was sort of on one side. There is still people who are wondering about the strategy, wondering about how this is going to gain traction, how long it's going to take to gain traction. And the way that I've been talking about it is purely through I think the number of developers who are eager to participate in this kind of an environment where we don't require them to store sign, where we don't require all this extra hoop for Windows, but in fact this will run on Mac and on Linux and in Chrome OS. So that there's something there there's sort of a faith or a trust that says there's enough developers out there that want this, that it's going to work. And we have sort of come to the conclusion that this feels like the right path forward in order to make the community stronger and build sort of a conversation around, hey, this app runs really great on Windows and not other platforms like Mac or mobile.
The other thing to add is in the last couple of years, we've seen an uptick of web hybrid applications coming to Windows anyway, right? So a lot of the developers are, because we don't have something like this, that's one of the reasons that people are building Electron apps for Windows, right? And so as Windows, it's better for us to be able to do something like this than have like 10 Electron apps running that are each bringing their own version of Chromium and bloating someone's device, right? So there's some amount of inevitable it's happening, and it's better to have it happen on our terms than have it happen on whatever happens if we pretend that it's not happening, for lack of a better way to, it's kind of a wordy way to say it, but it's like, it's happening either way. And we've had various web app types on Windows over the years, right? Like we've tried HWAs, the other brand of PWAs, and we've gotten feedback that having them not be standards-based was causing friction. And so there's enough things happening that I think we have enough momentum to make it happen. But obviously, we're a large company and we have a lot of different app platforms that are all kind of competing.
We have like 1 minute, so I just wanted to say also, there has also been a cultural shift at Microsoft, or we're in an ongoing cultural shift at Microsoft, which is about going where our customers are. It's why we picked Chromium. It's what our president of our organization continuously beats on us, which is we go where our customers are, which is on a Mac and in Linux and on Windows. And one of the really neat things that we can see is like Lighthouse inside of inside of the dev tools in Chrome will show you things to do to make your PWA really effective on a mobile device. All those things still also apply to Windows, like making it scale to window sizes, making it really, really performant, and using appropriate APIs, offline, all that. So since we want to go where all of our customers are, this seems like a natural next step.
Any other?
I think we're out.
Yeah. Oh,
Cool.
I guess there's a couple more questions.
Okay, all right.
Is it? I don't know if we're how.
Schedule-wise, we're flexible.
Okay, cool. All right, let's do another.
What does the story look like for folks running Chromium, not Chrome, or other Chromium derivatives?
So I would say a lot of our changes are going in, not a lot. Some of our changes are going into Chromium. A number of our changes go straight to Chromium. So anybody using any other Chromium-based browser will get those changes. There are very specific, unique changes in the, I hate using this word, but in the Chrome of the browser. So when you're in the Edge browser, which is Chromium-based, and you're doing like an install, the behavior, the experience will be different from when you're in Chrome as a Chromium-based browser, because we have unique opportunities to present differences to our customers based on what we think our customers want to see. So other browsers like Brave or Vivaldi or some other Chromium-based browser would have to make those changes themselves to participate. They get a lot of it for free, but not the install and other behaviors. And then on Windows, Brave would have to apply to be allowed to be a host to take even deeper advantage of the OS. The way that we're doing it and making it standards-based means that if they don't apply, they still get like what she showed, which would be they still get to uninstall. It's just not one click. They still get some jump list support, but not customized jump list. They can't be share target because that's a security thing. But they get a lot of the behaviors just out of the box.
But all of the APIs that we're talking about are public, and it's just a question of like the Windows side APIs are all public and documented. So if another browser was interested, they'd just have to engage and choose to like figure out the next steps.
Yes.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks. Right behind you.
This is amazing. Thank you. This looks like so much work. We have in Chrome, we've been running a system that allows some browsers, today Chrome, to mint real system applications using a service that Google runs in the background when you install a PWA on Android. And one of the deficiencies of this system is that we haven't opened it up to other browsers. And one of the concerns is, well, how do we, like, what does that list include, to sort of echo Victor's question? So not now, but at some point, I'd love to talk about how you are applying a policy lens to making that decision about who can apply and when you approve and that sort of thing. Because we're struggling with the same thing, and you're ahead of us, and we'd love to learn from your intelligence.
Hand wave. I'm not sure we're ahead. We have had very long and passionate conversations about how to enable different browsers to participate in this system. And so, yeah, we should absolutely talk about it. And I don't think it's appropriate here, but we should have conversations for sure. Yeah.
I know there's two other questions over here, but I wanted to get one in. What are your thoughts or plans around resource attribution, for example, battery usage, network usage, and so forth for these child apps?
I think it's
I was going to say, I don't know that we have an explicit plan. I think this is the first step in being able to have a reasonable plan. So like in Task Manager, even once we do this work, it still shows a lot of the resource fields as null because we don't have the right attribution in place yet. But I think, again, having actual app identity is the first step in being able to build something like that. And I think over time we would want to, especially if we're getting more powerful apps. Like if we're talking about something like AutoCAD running as a web app, that's something that actually would be beefy enough to like suck up resources where we'd want to be able to tell the user that's the thing pegging your CPU, right? Like, but I don't know if you have any more insight, but that's, I think, as far as we.
No, I think yeah, we're at the first stage of enabling that.
Yeah, but this is basically this whole identity thing is our prerequisite to being able to do any of the other interesting, cool stuff that like native apps integrating can do.
Yeah, I think it would be utterly cool if you could see in Task Manager like that like just assign the renderer process to. I mean, I'm assuming Edge is using the same process model. So there's a Edge process like with the PWA helper that Edge has, that will still send a signal to the existing Edge browser process to create a renderer for.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think it's doable, just not something we've.
This is just our plan for.
This is just our plan for how we're going to decrease the amount of RAM that Chrome looks like it's using. We're just going to put people off into their own little window. Like, yeah, us, no. It's these other applications. Come on.
Yeah, it's funny. Like before being here, I worked on like the system compositor, and it was the same thing where someone would run like 1,000 animations like in an app, but like DWM is the thing that looks hungry, and you're like, no, it's not our fault.
Yeah.
Yeah, even like internal.
My daughter's calling.
This does look amazing. Congratulations, look, good work.
Thanks.
I was going to ask, do you have any thoughts on the permission model and the gaps between installed Windows applications and installed PWA applications? Do you think, do you have any thoughts on if there's a difference between the two, or if the installed PWAs look more like the web permission model, or if it looks more like the native installed permission model?
Yeah. It has to look more like the web permission model, but I think there are distinctions between when you go to a site in your browser that happens to be a PWA, like it's got service worker in it and whatever, as opposed to having it installed. I think that's actually a much longer conversation. And I think there actually might be a breakout.
Yeah, I think we proposed a breakout to talk about that because we probably should have thoughts, but we don't really know yet what the right answer is.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so I had another question. So as like Chromium developers, I was wondering if you guys had a plan or a path forward. I think it's going to be a little bit harder to get my new version of Chromium that I just built signed in a way where it can be an installer of PWAs. Is there a path forward for like having new Chromium developers build something and be able to test like jump list features or something like that in like my own version?
It's interesting. Right now, it requires a specific build of Windows in order to test out some of that behavior, and a build of Edge, not Chromium. But I hear what you're saying. I haven't given that a lot of thought. That's something that we have to think about. I think that's really important. I haven't thought about that.
Last question.
Okay.
So in the task manager, how granular are you gonna have the information displayed? For example, how much of it is shared with Chrome? How do you represent it in the task manager? And what if there are instances of windows, of the multiple windows of the same app? Like, what were your thoughts on how to represent that?
Multiple windows of the same app, we usually consolidate into one line item. Like, I guess maybe the simple answer would be, as much as possible, we want to align to what native apps do. So sometimes if you have multiple instances of the same app, it'll be the like arrow and breakdown. If you have multiple windows but the same instance, it would be one entry. So as much as possible, I think our goal is to align to what native apps do. And if there are places where we can't achieve that, then we would look at what our best, fallback is.
Yeah.
But yeah, right now we're kind of just, hey, it shows up, and now what's the next round of feedback we get? Like, hey, it shows up, but why does it say no resources and all these other things, right? Like, there's still. I think as we start flighting it and have people using it, we'll get some of that feedback on what feels wrong.
And have you had some thoughts on how you would represent how much memory is shared between Edge and the app, or the browser and the app?
Not yet. It's a challenge we don't want to duplicate. We don't want to show like, oh, it looks like Chrome's using all this memory and Starbucks is using all this memory. So it's something we have to work through, but we haven't figured it out yet.
Cool. That was amazing. Thank you. Thank you for being so transparent. Okay, and then we're going to further deviate from schedule. At least I need a short break. So let's aim for a 5-minute break. It'll probably be 10. So start back up at 10:20 with Peter Beverly talking about same thing, but mobile.